Rachel the rogue sneaks back to the party. She whispers, "The enemy commander is up there. I count, I don't know, 50 or 60 orcs with him. The commander is leading some kind of ritual. Something is happening. I don't know if we can take all of them at once." Wally the wizard pipes up and says, "I've got this. Show me." Rachel the rogue sneaks up closer to the clearing with Wally the wizard. Wally pulls his component pouch out, withdraws a tiny, smaller silk pouch, pours into his hand a powdered black pearl. And then Wally the wizard begins to wave his hand over his palm and speak the incantation of power. Then he thrusts his hands out towards the circle. And in the middle of the enemy encampment, dark energy ripples outward to a sphere 60 feet across. And all of the orcs fall dead, leaving the commander startled as Bob the Barbarian rushes in with his great axe. This is an example of how to use the Circle of Death spell. Hey everybody, welcome to Arcane Wednesday. This is DM Gallibond, and we are going to talk about Circle of Death today for September 2nd, 2020. All right, let's get on with the show. All right, Circle of Death is a really interesting 6th level spell. We're going to go ahead and flip over to it here. And we will take a look at what Circle of Death looks like in 5th edition. You know, it's a pretty powerful 6th level spell for sorcerers, warlocks, and wizards. Casting time of 1 action, a range out to 150 feet away from the caster, and the area of effect is a 60-foot diameter sphere, or a 60-foot radius sphere. I'm sorry. Okay. Verbal, somatic, material components, and the material components, yes, it's the powder of a crushed black pearl worth at least 500 gold, necromancy spell, constitution save, and it's just a sphere of negative energy that goes out, and it will deal 8d6 necrotic damage on a failed save or half as much on a successful one. So this is the kind of spell that you can use to like just eliminate all the trash. If your party is going into an encounter where there's a whole mess of enemies and maybe 1 or 2 really powerful enemies, this one spell can just completely destroy all of the all of the low-level enemies. And if you actually upcast it to 7th or 8th or 9th level, then for every spell level above 6, you add 2d6 more necrotic damage. So it would be 10d6 at 7, 12, and then 14d6 at a 9th level if you used a 9th level spell slot for it. All right, so now this spell, Circle of Death, it actually has been around since the beginning of the game, although about in the middle of the game it did change its name. So let's go ahead and take a look at how it started. It started back in original D&D as a 6th level magic user spell called Death Spell. 240-foot range, instantaneous, and it slayed 4d8 or 4 to 32 hit dice worth of creatures within a 60 by 60 by 60 area. So it's a 60-foot cube, or a cube 60 feet on a side. And, so it kind of works like the sleep spell where you roll the dice and you see how many hit dice of creatures are affected. And then you start at the beginning with the lowest hit dice and you work your way out. Normal plants and insects are automatically slain, and those with no hit points are not counted in the total affected. Undead are not affected, nor are creatures with 8 or more hit dice or levels of experience. So lowest hit dice creatures are affected first. Each victim must make a saving throw versus death ray or die. Now, why did they put that caveat in there? Probably because they were envisioning that the magic user might center this spell on himself. And you have to be pretty high level before you can get 6th level spells. So by the time he gets this, he's got more than 8 hit dice, as do probably the rest of his companions and the rest of the members of his party. So he can go ahead and fire that off, and it will not affect the party, but it will affect all of the other things around him. Now, this was a fairly straightforward version of the spell. I want you to hang on to something, because when we get to 1st edition or AD&D, you're going to need to get a slide rule out to figure out how this spell works. Okay, so when a death spell is cast, it slays creatures in the area of effect instantly and irrevocably. The number of creatures which can be so slain is a function of their hit dice. So now you have the victim's hit dice, and then the maximum number of creatures affected. So if the victim's hit dice are less than 2, you can affect 4d20, or anywhere between 4 and 80 creatures. If the creatures are between 2 and 4 hit dice, 3d10 creatures, or 3 to 30. And this is where you go into these really crazy, complicated hit die ratings for monsters back in the early editions. If the creature had anywhere from 4 plus 1 hit dice to 6 plus 3 hit dice, it was 2d4 of those creatures. And then if they were from 6 plus 4 hit dice to 8 plus 3 hit dice, it was 1d4 creatures. Then, if that's not complicated enough, if a mixed group of creatures is attacked with a death spell, use the following conversion. Okay. All right. So this is just kind of crazy. If there's a group of these creatures, then for the ones less than 2 hit dice, you can affect up to 10 creatures. And the ones that are 2 to 4 hit dice, you can affect up to 5. And the ones that are 4 plus 1 to 6 plus 3, you can affect up to 2. And if you've affected those, then you can't affect any 6 plus 4 to 8 plus 3. Now, if you have enough, so that's if you have enough creatures, you would get 10 of the less than 2, 5 of the 2 to 4s, 2 of the 4 plus 1 to 6 plus 3s, and none of the higher ones. Then if the highest level creature is 4 plus 1 to 6 plus 3, you would affect 8 of the less than 2, 3 of the 2 to 4, none of the 4 plus 1 to 6 plus 3, and only half of the 6 plus 4 to 8 plus 3. Oh, okay. I think this is actually like a pivot table. God, this is such a complicated thing. Okay, 2 to 4 hit dice. You would affect 4 of the less than 2, 1/8 of the 4 plus 1 to 6 plus 3, and 5% of one of the 6 plus 4 to 8 plus 3. So okay. And then it gives you this whole big wall of text to tell you how to actually calculate all this stuff. All right. What I'm going to say, if you're a DM and you're running a first edition game, just ignore all this shit. Just completely ignore this shit and figure out, okay, just roll the number of hit dice. Just roll 4d20 hit dice. Say that's how many hit dice of creatures are affected, and start with the lowest number of hit dice and just work your way up. That's the easiest way of doing it. It's just kind of nuts to try to figure all that other stuff out. Okay, now in second edition. Second edition is pretty much the same as first edition. Now it's 30-foot cube per level. So for every caster level, it's a 30-foot cube, and the range is 10 yards per level. And then okay. Yeah. So this is this is a little bit better explanation. Okay. If creatures of differing hit dice are attacked with a death spell, roll the dice 4d20 to determine how many creatures of under 2 hit dice are affected. If the number rolled is greater than the actual number of sub 2 hit dice creatures, apply the remainder of the roll to the higher hit dice creatures by consulting the table below. So for every 1 creature is 1. Or for every 1 number on the die roll, it's 1 creature under 2 hit dice. 2 numbers on the die roll is 1 creature of 2 to 4 hit dice. 10 numbers on the die roll are the 4 plus 1 to 6 plus 3, and 20 numbers on the die roll are 6 plus 4 to 8 plus 3. Okay, so that's, yeah, and then they actually give you an example here with the with a different actual group of monsters that have known levels of hit dice. So 20 goblins, 8 gnolls, and 4 ogres led by a hill giant. 4d20 gives a total of 53 points. 20 of this eliminates the goblins. 16 kills the gnolls, and the remaining 17 kills 2 of the ogres. The remaining 7 points are enough to kill 1 more ogre. The other 2 ogres and hill giant are unharmed. A death spell does not affect lycanthropes, undead creatures, or creatures from planes other than prime material. And now the thing in, of course, in a rules cyclopedia, it doesn't say anything about material components, because in original D&D they didn't talk about material components. And in first edition and second edition, the material component is a crushed black pearl with a minimum value of 1,000 GP. In 5th edition, it's 500 GP. All right. So now And remember, in original D&D first edition and second edition, it's all been Death Spell. Finally, in third edition, the name changes to Circle of Death. And it's all 6th level spells. And sorcerers and wizards get it in third edition. And this is this calculation just uses 1d4 hit dice worth of living creatures per caster level to a maximum of 20d4, simplifying everything with all the complicated math that you had to do in the other ones. So maximum of 20d4. Creatures with the fewest hit dice are affected first. Among the creatures with equal hit dice, those who are closest to the burst point of origin are affected first. And no creature of 9 or more hit dice can be affected, and hit dice that are not sufficient to affect a creature are wasted. So there's no, like, it won't do additional damage to somebody. If it's not enough hit dice to kill the creature, then, too bad, they just get wasted. It doesn't have any effect on them. And a powder of a crushed black pearl with a minimum value of 500 gold is used in third edition. It doesn't appear in fourth edition. Okay, so that is Circle of Death. Hey, we're trying something a little bit new here. Let me know what you think of the open. Do you prefer having something like that where there's a story or an example of how the spell would be used before we talk about the mechanics of how the spell works? Tell me what you think about that. We're also making a few changes to some of the other weekly things that we do. All right. I have been DM Gallibond. If you like this, please like the video. If you like what we do here, please subscribe. Click the post notification bell so that you know every time a new video drops on the channel. And I would just like to say thank you for watching and wish everyone a wonderful good night. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.